Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and I'm recording this on October 20th. There was a series of new missiles launched, so we're going to listen to the Al Jazeera and the Live Now broadcast. This just happened, but before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. People are having problems sleeping these days, so please go to my store and get the Good Night Formula. This has tryptophan and melatonin in it. It's very important to get 3 cycles of REM sleep a night and deep sleep. Why? Because you'll be well rested in the morning. During that period of time, you'd be detoxifying your central nervous system and you're consolidating memory. Chronic sleep deprivation means lack of energy, a buildup of toxins, and potentially early onset of dementia. So it's really important to have a good night's sleep. Make sure you get 3 cycles of REM sleep a night. Get the Good Night Formula. Take it every day to be well rested. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com and get the Good Night Formula. All right, so let's listen in to what's going on.
It's affiliated with Hezbollah and also the Shia community. So they did say they would hit a number of those branches. The closest branch to
a kilometre and a half away. But the majority of strikes we've been seeing is happening in Dahlia, in those southern suburbs. But it's important to note the timing as well. There was a lull of about 5 days up until Saturday evening, just before sunset. There were about 10 strikes in the space of about an hour and a half, again in Dahlia, and then more into Sunday morning. And then, of course, this huge escalation taking place into the early hours of this morning. But it comes just before the US envoy, Alice Hoxie, will be visiting Beirut. He'll be visiting Najib Mikati, the caretaker prime minister. And it's likely that he will then push to implement 1701, the UN Security Council resolution that essentially means that the Lebanese army can come back to the south for Hezbollah to push past the Litani River 30 kilometers from the border with Israel, and for Israel to respect the sovereignty of Lebanon. So it's very likely that they will be discussing and pushing for this. So again, very interesting timing that we're seeing the escalation just before this diplomacy takes place.
Yeah, very interesting timing, Laura, indeed. While you are speaking, we are looking at some of the recent pictures of the aftermath of what we understand to have been a strike on one of the branches of Al-Hassan in what appears to be near the airport. That's the strike that you referred to. Of course, given these strikes happening in multiple locations, once again, civilian populations in Beirut and elsewhere in the country are being forced to take cover or flee. This must be sending panic through civilian populations there in Beirut.
Panic, worry, trauma, absolutely. 1.2 million people displaced across the country so far. Now, there was this lull in Beirut. We saw a lot more people going out into the cafes, more people resting, essentially going out to have some sort of social life. And this evening, that really shut down again. People leaving these cafes immediately, people looking worried at their phones. I was actually in the cafe at the time. Somebody said to me, look, it's very dangerous to be here at the moment. So, of course, there is much fear and anxiety across the country. There's been strikes going on continuously, but especially that, if you're looking at these financial institutions, they're everywhere. There's 31 across the country. There's 15 of those in central Beirut. And as I said, they're central areas. We're talking about high civilian populations, and they don't know whether or not they will be hit nearby. So people don't know where to go. There were reports of traffic jams as roads were being closed, particularly around those southern suburbs, and people were trying to get out. And again, they're hitting also quite close to ministries, the Ministry of Labour. Now, we know that there's still planes taking off from Reykjavik Airport. There was one not long ago. So the airport is still operating, only by a very, very reduced service. But But of course, these strikes are happening just adjacent to that. You know, they're happening in places like Al-Shawafat or Brighteon, which is in those southern suburbs, and this is where it's been most heavily hit. So people have been trying to get flights out there, booked up for weeks. People are moving, and of course, we've got people sleeping on the streets. A lot of the shelters are at capacity. So people will, of course, be relying very heavily on some sort of diplomacy. And Najib McCarthy had already put out a statement earlier, essentially saying that the only way to solve this is through diplomacy, not on the battlefield. He wants to see the Lebanese army returning to the south, although even the Lebanese army has been attacked by the Israelis. So they will really, again, as I said, push to see the implementation of 1701.
All right, Laura, many thanks for that, Laura Khan in Beirut. And I understand we are talking about at least 8 strikes on Beirut alone over the course of this evening. Let's speak to Noor Ode, who's in the Jordanian capital, Amman. That's because the Israeli government's banned Al Jazeera from both Israel and the occupied West Bank. So, Noor, we've been talking about a change of tactic by the Israeli military. The Israeli army spokesperson has been talking about these attacks on Beirut. What's the message been?
Well, the message from the Israeli army spokesperson is that it had only been targeting Hezbollah military assets, and now it's going to go after its financial assets. And he said the objective of this campaign would be to undermine the confidence of Hezbollah operatives in the organization. So we're seeing the Israeli army widening the scope of its targets, not just degrading its military capabilities, but really striking at that relationship between Hezbollah and the community that supports it.
Noor, in the last few days, we have seen these Hezbollah strikes in various locations in Israel, including one that landed in Caesarea near to Benjamin Netanyahu's residence there. It didn't cause any damage, didn't injure anybody. But we also are hearing that Israel has intercepted a drone that was in apparently Syrian airspace. Explain to us what all of that means.
Well, yeah, I mean, over the past day, the Israeli army says 200 rockets were fired into Israel from Lebanon. The last notification we got from the Israeli army had to do with this unmanned drone coming in apparently from the east, so from Yemen, and intercepted over Syrian skies, which is also a reminder that Israel has hegemony over the skies in the region. It flies over Syria, it flies over Lebanon at will, and that's been the case for years, not just during the current escalation or war, but that drone has been downed. The Hezbollah rockets and the attacks and the drone attacks have increased in ferocity, not just in the number of rockets. They've reached deeper, and they have caused casualties among Israeli soldiers, including that attack on a base in Benyamina, south of Haifa, a few days ago.
Noor, as always, many thanks. Noor Ode in Amman. Just to remind you, what you are looking at on your screen is a live shot of the Beirut skyline. We know of at least 8 attacks that have hit various targets in the Lebanese capital. We understand, according to the Israeli military, is the aim of all of this is to hit the financial arm of Hezbollah, the institution known as Al-Hassan. Elijah Mania is a military and political analyst. He joins us from Brussels to help us understand what the strategy is behind all of this. Elijah, welcome back. So can you explain what the purpose of this strike, or these strikes at least, on this important financial institution is, Al-Hassan, and of course of announcing that it was going to do this way in advance of what we're seeing in Beirut and indeed other places in Lebanon?
Well, it indicates, first of all, that Israel has exhausted all its military objectives and can no longer find any military target to hit. So they've started with what Defense Minister Yoav Gallant promised, saying that we have defeated Hezbollah, which is not very accurate because Hezbollah is still fighting and launching missiles and clashing with the Israeli troops along the south of Lebanon borders. And what Yoav Gallant said, now we're going to destroy Hezbollah. And what he's saying is he wants to destroy the institutions that belong to Hezbollah, starting with Al-Qadr Hassan, that is a financial institution that is offered an interest-free loan and financial services to the Lebanese community, particularly the Shia, but not exclusively to them. It is indeed affiliated to Hezbollah, but it has nothing to do with reinforcing Hezbollah finance or bringing any finance to Hezbollah because it is interest-free. So it facilitates anyone who wants a loan, and it is a financial institution not related to the central bank. And in fact, it was the only institution that gave back the money to all the depositors in US dollars when the Lebanese currency was crippled and devaluated. So the Israelis are less.
Can you explain to us exactly what these targets are? Are we talking about local branches? Are we talking about offices? Are we talking about places where money is kept? I mean, how important are these sites to Lebanese civilians, for instance?
Well, it doesn't change anything because these are bureaucratic offices where people deal like in any bank, and they just take only applications and handle money when there is a guarantee. And it is not something that is going to affect the Lebanese institution in anything because it's a private institution, and it also facilitates loan to people who want to have projects. It gives the individual $5,000. Municipalities sometimes lend money off this institution, Qadr Hassan, up to $35,000. So it's something that just gives money to people when they have a guarantee, or they have people with a lot of money who want to facilitate for other people to have their own projects, but they want to guarantee that their money will be returned to them. So it is really not affecting Hezbollah that receives between $50 to $70 million in cash from Iran on monthly basis. This is not a secret. And the Hezbollah operatives receive their money also in cash, independently from this financial institution that deals only with civilians and give money only to civilians.
All right, Elijah, as always, many thanks for that. Elijah Mania, a military and political analyst joining us from Brussels.
Thank you.
Well, earlier on Sunday, towns and villages across southern Lebanon were hit by a series of Israeli attacks. Dozens of settlements dotted throughout the border region have been hit by airstrikes, in some cases pounded repeatedly in just a matter of minutes. Israeli military officials say they're targeting Hezbollah infrastructure in the area. Meanwhile, about 160 rockets have been fired from Lebanon into Israel since midnight. A large number of fire and emergency crews have been dealing with blazes in several locations in Upper Galilee. Police have partially closed Israel's longest highway. Route 90 extends for 490 kilometers, and it cuts through the entire Jordan Valley. Well, let's take a closer look at where this latest fighting has been happening and, of course, why. Israel has stepped up its airstrikes across southern Lebanon, especially in these areas on the screen, in Aita al-Shab. There's also ground fighting. Hezbollah too has expanded its rocket and drone attacks on Israel. That's mainly in the north. It says it's targeted at least 13 different locations, including these areas. Hezbollah says its fight against Israel is entering a new phase as it steps up its attacks. Initially, it said it targeted Israel in support of Palestinians in Gaza. But now the conflict has taken on a new shape as it faces Israeli soldiers on the ground.
So the previous person that was being interviewed from Brussels, he goes, well, Israel just destroyed all, most of the targets for the military targets for Hezbollah. And so they're just picking targets, and attacking the financial network now. Meanwhile, the next segment on Al Jazeera, Israel-Hezbollah conflict. Hezbollah says fighting entering new phase. Israel hasn't degraded Hezbollah enough. And so Israel needs to hit not just underground facilities and rocket batteries and all that. It needs to destroy all of its apparatus, its military apparatus, and its governmental and financial apparatus.
Goal is to make it safe for its citizens to return to the northern border area. That's by pushing Hezbollah fighters even further north. Imran Khan reports from the front line on the Israeli-Lebanese border.
Israeli tanks crossing into Lebanese territory. Hezbollah drones attacking the home of the Israeli Prime Minister. Just a couple of months ago, few would have predicted this level of escalation. Until weeks ago, Hezbollah's declared goal was to wage a controlled operation to keep a part of the Israeli army too busy in the north and then away from Gaza. It used short-range missiles and drones to strike at mostly military targets within a limited range of a few kilometers within Israel. For Israel, Hezbollah drones and missile attacks were provocation enough to warrant a serious punishment. On October 1st, Israel announced the beginning of a ground invasion of Lebanon.
We heard the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying today and giving like the beginning of the ground invasion when he said where Israel is moving from defeating to destroying Hezbollah.
This seems to have forced Hezbollah to step up its attacks, saying it's no longer a limited support operation to help Gaza, but a war of self-defense. Hezbollah began to use longer-range missiles, hitting a wide range of targets across Israel. Last week, Hezbollah launched a drone that hit a military base near Haifa, killing 4 Israeli soldiers and wounding nearly 100. And then, in another major development on Saturday, it managed to hit the residence of the Israeli Prime Minister in the town of Caesarea. Israel has seen it as an assassination attempt. Hezbollah says it's a message to tell Israelis that despite a year of intense Israeli bombardment, the group can still launch an attack against security targets inside Israel. For 3 weeks now, Israeli troops have been able to push inside Lebanon more than a few hundred meters. They're facing fierce resistance as they try to take the 2 border locations of Ait al-Sham and Dahira.
Hezbollah is sending messages to Israel, trying to persuade Israel to think again, although knowing that 5 divisions on the borders have only one objective, is to move into south of Lebanon.
Meanwhile, there's been no let-up in the Israeli artillery bombardment and the air raids of the area. Of all the strikes that have taken place today, perhaps the most serious took place just over there on that ridgeline, where the use we saw of cluster munitions were used. Cluster munitions are a very serious type of weapon. It's a bomb that effectively drops little bombs across a wide area. Israel has also been using white phosphorus in its attacks in Lebanon. Both white phosphorus and cluster munitions are banned under international law. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera, Aspire, Southern Lebanon.
So to Gaza now, where Israel has continued to bomb Beit Lahir, that's in northern Gaza. Nearly 100 Palestinians were killed and dozens injured since Saturday night. The Israeli military has laid siege to northern Gaza for almost 2 weeks, restricting the entry of food and cutting off communication services. Anna Mahmoud reports from DrPaulCottrell in central Gaza.
Ordered to move or face Israeli bombing, people in Jabalia and northern Gaza are being forcibly displaced once again, as Israeli forces surround the densely populated refugee camp and intensifying their attacks. Many Palestinians say they have been separated from their families after Israeli soldiers stormed their shelters and detained dozens of men.
The Israeli tanks besieged the area and forced us all out of the school. They detained me and warned all women to leave in groups. We left everything behind, even baby milk.
Northern Gaza has already suffered the heaviest destruction of Israel's war on Gaza. Jabalia, the largest of 8 refugee camps in the Strip, was one of the first areas to be targeted by Israeli forces after the October 7th attack last year. Palestinians here who have been repeatedly displaced and have been sheltering in schools say they have nowhere else left to go.
Israeli tanks besieged the school we were sheltering in and warned us to leave and head south. We don't want to go south, so we decided to move to Gaza City. We found a dozen Israeli tanks every few meters we walked. They kept forcing us to leave, and we don't know where we headed.
In Beit Lahia, rescue teams are trying to reach people trapped in rubble hours after an Israeli bombing killed dozens of people in a residential area. The Israeli military began a new offensive in northern Gaza more than 2 weeks ago, saying it was to prevent Hamas from regrouping. The siege has led to a communications and internet blackout. Hospitals have been forced to shut down after coming under repeated attacks. Humanitarian agencies have warned that virtually no aid has entered northern Gaza in the past few weeks. The UN has said some 400,000 Palestinians are trapped there with no food, water, medicine, or essential supplies. I'm Mahmoud, Al Jazeera, from the central area of the Gaza Strip, Palestine.
Earlier, we spoke to Ahmed Najjar. He's a Palestinian playwright from Gaza who moved to the UK. His family is still in the Strip. He described the desperate conditions they're facing.
My parents and some of my siblings are in Jabalia camp, and my sister lives in Beit Lahia. And as far as I know, that she left Beit Lahia a couple of days ago. I was told by my family that she left. But I didn't manage to speak to them since the massacre took place in Beit Lahia. And I really hope that she didn't go back to her place. Obviously, seeing how Gaza has turned into rubble, all the memories that I had in Gaza, my university, my school, the restaurants that I used to go to, the cafes, the beaches that I used to go to, all completely destroyed. That, of course, has very devastating impact on me, and nightmares every day to really know that you have been erased, your past and your identity and who you are and what you are, because we are, as a human beings, we are what we have done, and we are where we have been, and the places that mean something to us, people, places, everything. And that to see all of this has been completely erased. I don't know if there are words to describe the nightmares that I really go through when I think about it. And even now, I'm talking to you about it, just about to break into tears to think about the fact that, we've been destroyed, we've been genocided, and the world has allowed it. The world has allowed this to happen to Gaza. We've seen hospitals being destroyed completely. We've seen universities, schools. We've seen children being killed and torn apart. We've seen women, men, everybody.
What is happening to Gaza is a tragedy. But the reality of the situation is this is war. And this is what all out war is. And the only way to have a future where there's lasting peace, not kicking the can down the road and making it worse later, the only way you're going to have lasting peace is absolute destruction and one party wins. Now, do you think that if the shoe was worn on the other foot, where the Palestinians were doing this to the Israelis, that the international community, would care that much? If somehow, some way, the Arab community would galvanize and hurt the petrodollar somehow, like in the 1970s? Do you think that the United States would care that much about Israel and them being lost? No, they wouldn't. The proof's in the pudding. The proof is what the United States did in the 70s. What about when the Beirut bombings happened with the Marine barracks? Reagan didn't do much about it. Why? Because of this whole dynamic with the petrodollar and the need for Middle Eastern oil. See, people need to step back and look at this open-mindedly. All right, war is cold-hearted, and there are atrocities that can happen on both sides. And there's going to be destruction, loss of life, and cause problems with people's health and economics and stability. But what happens with all-out war, where there's an absolute winner, is eventually peace ensues. All right. If we played partially, if we, let's say, went only halfway with World War II and didn't absolutely destroy Italy and destroy Germany, do you think that there would be as much peace and stability within the European Union as they have now? Of course not. If there was an absolute victory on the battlefield during the revolution and it was only halfway, do you think the United States would have had the prowess of the last 2 centuries if we only went halfway against England during the revolution? No, of course not. If it was an absolute total war, an absolute victory during the Civil War, and it was only halfway, do you think that this nation would be a union of 50 states? Of course not. The same issue with the Middle East. Absolute war does lead to lasting peace. Now, let's flip it. Like I said, if the situation was where Israel was absolutely being devastated and destroyed by the Muslim community, do you really think that the international community would really care? Because that would mean that those Muslim communities have somewhat created inroads politically and economically into the Western nations. Of course, the Western nations would ally themselves with the Palestinian cause then. But that's not what the Palestinians did. The whole point here is that absolute war, absolute victory will lead to long-lasting peace. Just creating a ceasefire and kicking the can down the road only makes it worse. So in a strange way, the whole international community did allow this to happen to Gaza, but not because they're letting Israel and the Palestinians, Israel fighting Hamas and Israel fighting Hezbollah. If the international community is allowing that to happen, that's not the real reason why Gaza and the Lebanese are getting all destroyed. It's because the Western community is allowing it to happen. No, the Western community is at fault because they kept on kicking the can down the road in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s. That's why. Because they didn't let all-out war reach homeostasis. They pushed ceasefires and compromises and negotiations and somewhat ceasefire treaties that didn't really mean anything. So all out a full victory on either side will usher in long-lasting peace. The Palestinians and the Israelis, the Palestinians, if they win on the battlefield, they deserve the land. If they lose on the battlefield, they don't deserve the land. It's that simple. The Germans didn't deserve to win World War, they didn't win World War II, so they don't deserve to, to be a superpower, for the whole European whole European landmass. They didn't win. It was that simple. So, this is what war is. War is destruction. War. This is the problem that people have is that they think that the UN in Westphalian logic is going to lead to long-lasting peace and prosperity. It doesn't. Absolute war, absolute destruction, a total victory does. Total victory does. Now, it's a shame that civilians have to be caught in the crosshairs of this, and there's so much collateral damage. But there wouldn't be so much collateral damage if the job was done decades ago. This person probably, if the job was done decades ago, and peace and prosperity ensued in the region. Let's say the Israelis were totally destroyed, all right? And the Arabs won. There would be peace and prosperity in that region, most likely. All right. But because Israel can't get the job done because the international community is always tying its hands behind its back, always, for decades, the job can't get done. And so peace and prosperity can't ensue. But you have to have total victory. Total victory looks like this. Hamas completely destroyed. Hezbollah completely destroyed. Iran's theocratic regime completely destroyed, and its nuclear capability completely destroyed. Do you see the common thread here? Completely destroyed. Now that means there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. That means that there's going to be a lot of civilian death. But through that, there's going to be a blossoming and a flourishing of those societies that can be rebuilt, make their society stronger, and they no longer are at war with each other. But you have to have complete, absolute annihilation of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran for that to happen. Now, case in point, that's what the Allied forces in World War II did with Germany. That's what the United States did against Japan. So why do we think that? I mean, think about it. North Korea, the reason why you have a problem with North Korea and South Korea is because it was an armistice. It was a ceasefire. It wasn't, the Korean War wasn't won. And hence, decades later, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, because Korean War was in the 50s, the 2000s, the 2010s, the 2020s, we still have a problem with North Korea because it was an absolute destruction. Now, could we have knocked it out with modern technology after 1950s? We probably could have destroyed North Korea with the Clinton administration. When Kim Jong-il was ill, and instead of building up military and nuclear capability. But we didn't, because we didn't want to get the job done. We never want to get the job done. We didn't get the job done in Afghanistan or Iraq. Same problem. Didn't get the job done. Just kicked the can down the road because of some sort of political expedience. And this is what happens. So it's not the international community saying Israel just bomb the shit out of Gaza and Lebanon. No, the international community failed because they didn't let homeostasis be reached in that region with all-out war for the last 40 years. That's the problem. Now, whoever wins, wins. But they all need to go, they all need to battle it out. That's what war is. I mean, do you think that in the United States that we have all this prosperity and all this freedom of opportunity and whatnot and security because it was just kind of like our God-given right? No, of course not. It's because there were wars and there was absolute victory. That's simple. But then we, sit up, high on our horse saying, such and such people, you can't do this, and such people, you can't do that. Just kick the can down the road. You're going to have a peace, we're going to have some sort of Westphalian ceasefire peace agreement. But no war, no lasting peace can happen unless there's total victory. It's that simple. Now, if the Palestinians deserve the land because they win on the battlefield, so be it. If the Israelis win on the battlefield and destroy and push back the Palestinians out of the West Bank and they get other, land areas in the process, so be it. Because they won on the battlefield. But it's that simple. Whoever wins on the battlefield, that's who's going to own the land. That's how the United States was formed.
Killed the people in the north, especially in the valley, they are in concentration camps. They're being trapped and bombarded. We've seen people burned alive. We've seen so many horrible, horrendous things, and I don't understand how the world is accepting to allow this to happen.
For months now, Israel has blocked the entry of lives.
The same thing happened. It's the same problem with the international community. Look at the international community and during the Holocaust. During the Holocaust in World War II, the Americans didn't want to get involved and save the Jews. I mean, you just look, if you want to be honest about this, Americans didn't care about the Jews during the Holocaust. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They let it happen. Why? Because they were afraid to engage Germany. Same thing with the Brits. So stop playing this game that the international community is there to save you because of some sort of, some sort of altruistic, utopian logic. It's all about financial and political entanglement. And if you're not financially or politically entangled, you're not going to get the help from the international community. Now, it's a shame that these things are happening in Palestine, with the Palestinians, within the Gaza Strip and parts of the West Bank. But the international community didn't let homeostasis be reached in the region. Now, my take on this is that there's a metaphysical component to this, and that the borders are biblically set, and that it's going to go back to those inscribed borders in numbers. Now, that means that Israel is going to be larger. But for that to happen, there needs to be total war. And it looks like we're having it right now. Now, you or I aren't smart enough to understand why God wants it that way. But even if you don't believe that there's going to be a biblical boundary that's reestablished in Israel, even if you don't believe that, which doesn't matter what you believe, but even if you don't believe that, it's all about who wins on the battlefield. It doesn't matter. There's no such thing as good guy or bad guy on the battlefield. It's just win. That's all it is. It's win. And whoever wins gets the spoils. It's that simple. And us developed nations that are living high on the hog with all of its prosperity and security, that's how those nations were built, like the United States. Do you think England would have been as prosperous if it didn't, wasn't as decisive in certain battles throughout its history? Of course not. That's how they established the United Kingdom. Now, they were in decline for many different reasons, because of indebtedness and problems, especially indebtedness, but and power projection was probably spread out too thin. The empire was spread out too thin. Probably that's a big cause to it. But the thing is that they had bad finances and it started crumbling. The empire started crumbling. The same thing probably will happen to the United States somehow, some way in the future. But the United States is the United States because when it did war back in the day, it was absolute war and absolute victory. Unconditional surrender. That's what that means. Unconditional surrender allowed for accretion of the United States to allow for prosperity and security. So don't you think for peace and prosperity in that region that whoever's the victor needs to be unconditional surrender? An absolute victory. And when that happens, then you can reestablish these regions and rebuild, and then there would be peace and prosperity for the future generations. But the more you kick the can down the road, there's going to be more and more children that are going to be living in poverty and more children living in a war-torn area. So the international community trying to bring peace, but prevent a absolute victory, is only kicking the can down the road where there will be more suffering in the future. That's the cold-hearted facts of war and mankind. And whoever wins, wins.
Food as the situation has worsened over the past 2 weeks because of the Israeli army's siege in the area. On top of that, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been ordered to leave their homes or face bombing. Rights groups say these actions amount to war crimes. Israel has been accused at the International Court of Justice of carrying out 8 genocidal acts in Gaza, including killing Palestinians, mass expulsion, and the deprivation of food, water, and shelter. The ICJ has issued 3 orders in the past year demanding Israel prevent genocide, immediately stop its military offensives, and to urgently allow basic humanitarian aid into Gaza. While the court's orders are legally binding, Israel dismissed them, saying the ICJ lacks jurisdiction. Jeffrey Nice is a human rights lawyer. He led the prosecution of the former Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic at the UN's International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. He says countries are not adhering to their international obligations and as such are undermining the rule of law.
All right, I'm going to do a commercial. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps. I have 5 different varieties. This one happens to be charcoal tea tree, and this one is lemongrass. But I have 5 different varieties of soaps. Please go to the store, get this high quality soap. It's made from structural nano silver. It helps to neutralize pathogens, and it doesn't have any, crazy chemicals that you'd get from Procter & Gamble or Unilever. This is a very high quality soap. Get a couple bars for your household. It's way better than Dove or any of the other, soaps out there that have all those chemicals. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. We're in the cold season right now, and it's important to neutralize pathogens and mitigate that irritation in your throat right away. You can do those with the drops and the lozenges. I have 3 types of drops in a 100 count. Blueberry, cherry, and honey and lemon. Now, the moment you get this irritation in your throat, take the drops or the lozenges, neutralize the pathogens, and create the secretions that you need to maintain that mucosal barrier. If you mitigate it right away, you're reducing the chances of a a worsening infection. It's really important. The moment you have the irritation in your throat during the cold season or even during the allergy season, it's really important to get that so you don't get a respiratory infection, or you're trying to mitigate that. Because once you get an infection, even if it's mild, it's going to take you 3 weeks to remodel the damage it causes on the cells. And the average person gets sick 3 times a year. And that means 25% of the year, you're sick / healing from the sickness. So that ages you. That's, if you look at someone that gets sick all the time, they age faster. I also have lozenges in the Manuka honey flavor. Get a couple bags of the drops and the lozenges for your household so you're ready for the cold season. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video. All right, I want to play the France 24 about the US election.
And I'm delighted to be joined now by Thomas Gift, who's Associate Professor of Political Science at University College London and Director of the Centre on US Politics there. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
So you wouldn't have thought, perhaps, that Trump still has the ability to shock us after all we've heard from him, but he clearly does. How has he been able to close the gap with Harris? Is the entertainment shock factor part of it, or what else is going on here?
Well, I don't know if he's closing the gap that much. I mean, he has gained maybe 1 or 2 percentage points in the last week, which gives him the momentum, certainly. But still, right now, we're looking at a race about 47, 48, give or take. That's certainly within the margin of error. It's essentially just a coin flip. You know, I think Donald Trump has really tried to paint Kamala Harris as a flip-flopper who doesn't have any principles. People will say that she used to be for Medicare for all, now she's not. She used to be for looser border control, now she's not. She used to be against fracking, now she's not. And so I think that sort of playing that message over and over has been one way to resonate with voters in swing states.
Stay with us because we're going to jump into a big talking point from Saturday night. That's Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, who held his own rally to support Trump and announced he'd randomly hand out $1 million a day to a registered voter who signed a petition run by his pro-Trump organization. Let's watch what happened there.
Since early October, tech billionaire Elon Musk has been trying to encourage swing state voters to sign a petition in favor of free speech and gun rights. And he's been using his most persuasive asset, his money. His pro-Donald Trump Political Action Committee has been paying $47 to every registered voter who signs. But on Saturday, he said the media weren't paying enough attention to his petition, so he upped the ante. Anyone who signs in the largest swing state of Pennsylvania will now get $100, and a lucky few will get much more.
So I have a surprise for you, which is that we're going to be awarding $1 million to randomly to people who have signed the petition every day from now until the election.
Although he had previously vowed to stay out of politics, Musk has adopted deeply right-wing stances since taking over Twitter, now X, in 2022. Over the summer, he endorsed Trump and has ramped up various means of support for the candidate, including donating at least $75 million to his pro-Trump super PAC. Musk's America PAC has paid to run ads on Facebook and Instagram for voter registration, but has come under fire for only collecting detailed personal data on people from battleground states without helping them to register to vote. On X, Musk has repeatedly praised Trump and pushed false and inflammatory claims on topics including immigration, free speech, and voter fraud. In return, Trump has offered Musk a hypothetical high-level position in the as-yet unestablished Department of Government Efficiency.
So Thomas Gift, explain this for us, right? Because this might be a surprising move for some of our viewers in countries with perhaps stricter campaign financing rules. Is what Musk is doing here seen as outrageous at all, or is it just the status quo in America?
Well, it's certainly not seen as outrageous for Pennsylvanians who are signing up. Actually, I'm a Pennsylvanian and I'm a registered voter, even though I'm in London. And so I guess that makes me eligible for this contest. You know, I think Musk is able to get away with this because he's not providing sort of an explicit quid pro quo that I'll pay you if you vote a certain way. He's only doing it with his PAC. These political action committees essentially allow big donors to pour money, to spend money in ways that lack transparency, lack accountability. Elon Musk, I think, the outrage that he hopes to provoke is sort of the point. You know, he wants attention for this. He wants to place the spotlight on Trump. And so there's so many things that Elon Musk has done in recent days and weeks. This is just kind of the latest. So it's an interesting political strategy, to say the least.
But I mean, how can it not be a quid pro quo? You sign a petition on his pro-Trump website, that puts you in the running for $1 million. I mean, there's nothing clearer of a quid pro quo than that, surely.
Well, it's not explicit that you have to vote for Trump then. I think that that is kind of the differentiation. But at the same time, I do think that it violates political norms, certainly, because we think about vote buying and clientelism as being anti-democratic. It is ironic because Musk has complained that if Trump isn't elected, that this will be the last election that Americans face. And yet at the same time, I think he's doing some things that critics would say are anti-democratic, or at least not in the spirit that we would think of for a free, open, transparent democracy.
Let's zoom in now to one of the photo's top priorities.
What about a free and transparent democracy when you have lawfare from the Democratic Party going after Trump? And by the way, you have the FBI that's just burying the evidence of the Hunter laptop during the 2020 election. Yeah, right. Free and transparent, get real.
Healthcare, Pew Research says it's the second highest priority for voters on average. So activists say a lot is at stake for Black women in particular and have been raising awareness about racism, bias and intensive care. Let's take a watch of this news report.
Francesca is a doula herself, but when she gave birth to her third baby, she knew something was deeply wrong when she was rushed into an emergency C-section. It ended up having serious consequences as she required a hysterectomy and went into cardiac arrest.
I remember I told my doctor when I was getting cut, I can't breathe. She said, "Oh yeah, you can." When they cut me open, they cut my uterus, and it ruptured my uterus, and it bled out, and it caused all the heart issues and the blood clotting and all that things like that.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Black women in the US are 3 times more likely to die during pregnancy or delivery than white women. It attributes these disparities to multiple factors, including structural racism, implicit bias, underlying chronic conditions, and a lack of access to quality healthcare. With just 2 weeks to go till the US election, advocates are pushing to raise awareness about these reproductive health inequalities impacting Black women.
I think people feel demoralized and scared about what is possible depending on who holds power. And so I think that that's one of the things that makes this cycle feel really hard.
Activists say that reproductive justice goes beyond abortion, a key debate in this election since the US overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. Kamala Harris has made abortion rights a tenet of her campaign, calling out Donald Trump for the deaths of 2 young Black mothers in Georgia, a state with abortion restrictions and the 8th highest Black maternal mortality rate. Trump has taken credit for appointing Supreme Court judges who voted to reverse abortion rights. His campaign says that the former president has always made the health and safety of Black mothers a priority.
Now, Thomas, looking at Roe v. Wade specifically, it wasn't long ago.
Before we go to his answer, I just wanted to state for like the 100th time. First trimester, I personally think that the woman should have the opportunity for abortion. All right. But I do think that it is a state issue and not a federal issue. And therefore, states should determine if they want to even restrict that. But if you don't like that state, move to a state that you would prefer a more relaxed abortion law. All right. But the point here is that it's a state issue. But I personally think that first trimester, okay, especially, for rape, incest, kind of situation there. But the thing is that if it was rape or incest, you would get health care, and within days of the incident, there would be an expulsion of the pregnancy. So it's really a non-issue in that case, because most people would just, take some sort of abortion pill and expel the pregnancy. But it gets more complicated when it goes into the second and third trimester. In the second trimester, if it's a economic reason to do an abortion, I'm against it. If it is the health and safety of the mother, okay, for the second or the third trimester. But as you get closer into the third, because of medical science advancement, preemies can survive pretty well. All right. I mean, not perfectly, but I mean, advancements in preemie care has really advanced in the last 10 years. So, there's a point where, you could actually do a C-section, have save the mother's life, and still save the child's life. All right. So it gets a little bit complicated there. Is it viable? Is it viable enough to be able to use preemie care to be able to save the child and the mother's life? If the child is deformed or has some sort of genetic disorder that was not caught in the first trimester, but it's caught in the second trimester, or developed a problem during the second or third trimester, then it should be, the state shouldn't be telling the mother that they can't terminate the pregnancy. I think the mother and the father can make a decision to terminate the pregnancy due to genetic issues or some sort of developmental problem that's taking place in utero. All right. So there's a little bit of a complication to, should one be able to or not. But if it's a second or third trimester and it's because of economic reasons, no. There has to be a line established to protect a child in utero. Now, I don't think it should be in the first trimester, right? Because of rape and incest. But if it's just economic reasons, no, I don't think that the first trimester should allow for an abortion. If it's just economic reasons, there's no developmental issue or genetic issue, and it's not rape, it's not incest, then why terminate the pregnancy? It's because it becomes an economic issue or some social norm issue. No, it shouldn't be terminated. It should not be terminated. If it goes in the second or third, most likely it's not a rape or incest issue because they would have terminated it in the first trimester. And so it's more of a developmental issue, or, some sort of genetic issue, or, an economic issue that's taking place, or some sort of social norm issue. And the social norm or economic issue in the second and third trimester, nope, should not be terminated. So, I think that's a fair way to, to have that judicial balance where you're trying to protect the mothers with rape and incest, all right, but you're also protecting the child's life if possible. Now, if it's a developmental issue and the mother and the father don't want to, do not want to carry that pregnancy to term, it should be their right to terminate the pregnancy. All right, and then maybe they want to try again because they have to live with all the ramifications of that. All right, in dealing with that sort of situation. Now, someone would say, well, what about a social economic issue where the person, let's say, is married, gets pregnant, and the father dies, and it's an economic issue, and she doesn't want to take it to term, but the child is healthy, the in utero, there's no genetic problem or deformity. No, that child needs to be protected by the Constitution for life in the utero. In that case, because it's just economic or social. It's a social norm or economic norm. No, you don't terminate the pregnancy for some social or economic norm. No, because there needs to be some sort of in utero protection of life. But I think that the way I look at it is pretty well balanced. It gets rid of the problem. You can have abortion because of rape or incest, right? And you have opportunities for abortion if there are problems with the development or the safety of the mother, right? But it gets more complicated. If it's a problem with the safety of the mother, and it's getting close to term, all right, because of preemie care has really advanced, you can probably save both. You can probably save the child and the mother. So, that's my take on it. But this absolutism where the mother decides only, and, she takes it to late term abortion, for late term abortion, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There needs to be some provisions in there that allows them to have the abortion for extraneous reasons, but also when it gets to near term, you're protecting the life of the child. If the child, is viable and there's not genetic or deformity, the child needs to be protected. And, that's my take on it. We're getting to the point. If we're going to use the Constitution to give rights to females, which we should, then somehow, some way, the Constitution should also be used to save children in utero. There needs to be that realization.
That some analysts that we've been speaking to here on France 24 were saying actually Roe v. Wade alone could have been enough to really swing this whole election in favor of Kamala Harris. But has Trump managed to change the narrative around this at all?
Well, I still think that abortion is the Achilles heel of Republicans generally and Donald Trump specifically. In the 2022 midterms, Republicans significantly.
In the way the Democratic Party knows that it's always the Achilles heel for the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is a little bit more religiously mindset. They have more of a religious mindset. And the Democratic Party knows that crotch rights will always bring women in for voting to vote for a Democrat. So they always want this on the ballot, because the moment that this problem is solved and they no longer can rally their female constituents, most likely those females aren't going to vote Democrat. They're going to vote Republican. But they have to keep this in the election cycle every year. Democrats, as a party, doesn't want to solve the problem. They want to have it a perpetual problem because they want women to vote as a block. They want them to come to the voter booth always about crotch rights. That's the problem. And once again, women are taken advantage of from the Democratic Party. Same issue with the black vote. They want the blacks to stay on the urban plantation and vote Democrat. And if you don't, they're gonna ostracize you. They're gonna complain to you. They're going to demonize you. Look at what happened with Barack Obama demonizing black male voters, not wanting to vote for Harris. They want you on the plantation.
In large part, I think because of the abortion issue, a lot of suburban women came out and supported Democrats. We also saw that in state level referendums across the country in 2023. Donald Trump recognizes that this is a problem for Republicans. It's especially a challenge for him because he has to court two different constituencies. One is evangelical Christian conservatives who are very supportive of what Trump did by installing 3 conservative Supreme Court appointments to the bench, which eventually overturn Roe versus Wade. But at the same time, he does realize that there are a significant number of women who, on this issue alone, won't support him. So he's tried to take kind of a middle ground and say he's not in favor of a national abortion ban, but instead he's in favor of leaving this up to the states. But still, that's certainly not satisfactory to a large fraction of women. And I think it's going to cost him votes ultimately.
And given that this election might come down to a matter of tens, hundreds of thousands of votes in swing states, are there other key demographics in those states that might be a deciding factor as well?
Well, we always think about sort of the suburban vote, moderates who tend to be socially liberal but economically conservative, certainly watching those groups. I'm also looking at Black men in particular. This is a constituency that Donald Trump has made a lot of inroads with. And at one point during this campaign, he was on pace to have a higher share of the Black vote than any Republican presidential candidate in history. Of course, the Latino vote is large and growing. It's around 20% of the constituencies in some states. Trump has also made some inroads with that group as well. So suburban voters, minorities, and women, particularly in the suburbs, I think that those are the key constituencies that are still maybe undecided or need to be mobilized to get out to both candidates.
Thomas Gibb, political scientist at UCL. Thank you very much for your time. And obviously, if someone offers you $1 million check to vote as a
know nothing talking head that doesn't know really what's going on, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver toothpaste. This whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, neutralizes pathogens, maintains and improves your gum line, which is really important as you get older. That recedes. And by using this, because it's neutralizing pathogens and improving your oral hygiene, you're reducing the chances of cardiovascular disease and valvular disease. A lot of people don't realize as you get older, you can increase your cardiovascular disease and your valvular disease by poor oral hygiene. You don't want that. Please go to my store, get this toothpaste, get a few tubes of this toothpaste. It's very high quality. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The structural nano silver gel is a dual purpose product. It will help to heal your skin quicker with cuts and abrasions and minor burns. It also can be used as a skincare product. You just apply it on your skin every day and then exfoliate. Usually you can apply it at night and exfoliate in the morning. And then it'll help to neutralize pathogens by putting it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your nose, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils, neutralize pathogens and maintain that mucosal barrier. Please go to my store and get the structural nano silver gel. You're going to need a couple of the tubes of this structural nano silver gel because we're in the cold season now, and it's better to be prepared than to be sorry. So please go to my store and get that. And lastly, take the Max 35 or the Max 14. Take a teaspoon of it a day. Swish it in your mouth, gargle, and then swallow. You gargle for about 20 seconds or so. Take a teaspoon a day. What that'll do is it'll neutralize pathogens and maintain that mucosal barrier and help to boost up your immune system. If you're not feeling well during the cold season, take a tablespoon or two a day where you're swishing in your mouth, gargling, maybe a little bit longer than 20 seconds, and then swallowing it. That way you're maintaining a good oral hygiene, you're maintaining the mucosal barrier, and you're neutralizing the pathogens, so in the upper track. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35 or Max 14. That's the end of the transmission. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. All the links are in the description of this video. Also follow me on TikTok. You can follow me on my 2 channels on X and also on GETTR. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.